Another team that I think you and I are both hoping have, a good year as well. That's the Purdue Boilermakers. They, according to the FPI Power Index, are ranked 50th. Their 2022 recap, they went 8-6, 6-3 in the Big Ten last year. They won the Big Ten West before losing in the Big Ten championship game to Michigan and then were blown out by LSU in the Citrus Bowl. We won't talk too much about that. Notable departures.
Try playing a full-strength LSU without your top 6 players and your coach.
Notable
Good
departures. Aiden O'Connell, he's in the NFL. Payne Durham, he's in the NFL. Charlie Jones is in the NFL. All these NFL talents going out there. Corey Trice, the corner, he's gone as well. Now, what we're going to say to kick off this whole thing is that, for one, you know your team better than us, so if we missed anything, make sure you put that down in the comment section. And also, this is being recorded in late July, so this is done before. If there's anything major that changes, we'll try to get back on and update. If that changes, and if it's going to change anything, like with our predictions, anything like that. But we wanted to make that a little qualifier here. And so when I look, we talked about breaking in a new quarterback for Notre Dame. My player to watch on the offense for Purdue, I'm going with their new quarterback, the transfer from Texas, quarterback Hudson Card. He completed 69% of his passes for 899 yards, 6 touchdowns, and a pick in 5 games last season, where he got major pass attempts for the Longhorns. Sorry, didn't count his one attempt he got against Kansas into that completion percentage. But he kept the and also one big thing, and I know you talked about it a couple of times when we've talked off and on during the summer, is that Alabama or Texas fans have gone on the Purdue message boards and really hyped him up, especially for his performance against Alabama, where he kept them in the game, came in relief of Quinn Ewers, and almost got the upset over Alabama. They lose to number 1 Alabama by just a point last season, so it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. Purdue has been one of the best passing offenses in the Big Ten over the last 5+ years. They were second last year, and Purdue and Hudson Card have potential in Graham Harrell's offense to keep that trend going, and it's really going to be fun to watch that offense this year and see how Card is able to do.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting with him because Graham Harrell's air raid offense also, a lot of it predicates on the athleticism of the quarterback. And that's going to be something that Purdue hasn't had for a while within Hudson Card, is that athletic ability. Hudson Card can actually make things happen with his legs as well. So you got to really worry about that. Obviously, for me, the player to watch, it's for me, this is tough because obviously you all want to see Devin Mockabee. You want to see him come out, storm right out of the gates, and prove that last year was not a fluke and that he is just as good, especially with kind of a revamped offensive line, to see what he's able to do there, how the potential wrinkle of the read option could come into play with him and Hudson Card. There's not much depth at running back for Purdue, so you're going to need to see a lot out of Mockabee. Then you got Tyrone Tracy, who switched over to running back from wide receiver. But the biggest player for me to watch is tight end Garrett Miller. Garrett Miller is coming off of a season-ending knee injury last year that happened in the preseason, or early on in the season. Garrett Miller has the ability to be one of the best tight ends in the country. And, he's got the NFL talent, but we've never really been able to see it on full display because either he's been playing behind a couple other guys or injuries. And obviously when you have a tight end in front of you, like Payne Durham, you're not going to get your moment. But Graham Harrell has said the tight ends have a very, very large role within his air raid offense, and a pass catching tight end like Garrett Miller has the opportunity to really shine. And when you do have a new quarterback, obviously the tight end can always end up being a security blanket. And I think Garrett Miller really has the potential to show what he is capable of. And I know the Purdue coaching staff is really high on him. Purdue fans are really high on him. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he bounces back from that knee injury. But, when you look at this offense, there's just a ton of like, all right, what about wide receiver? Yeah, TJ Sheffield, is this his team now? Or is it Deion Burks, who's really been shining in during the offseason? Or is it any of the newer wide receivers? I mean, the names just kind of fly all over the place. There's so many unknowns and potential players to watch because of this new offense style, the new coaching staff, the new quarterback. I mean, revamped offensive line. It's just, there's a lot of questions, which is a big reason why a lot of the media pundits are not super high on the reigning Big Ten West champs.
Yeah, understandably so. There are a lot of unknowns going into the season. When I look at defensively, my player to watch, I'm going to go with defensive back Cam Allen. Illinois thrived when it came to takeaways in 2022. They were third in the country in turnover margin last season with new Purdue head coach Ryan Walters as the defensive coordinator. Allen was tied for the team lead with 3 interceptions a year ago, led Purdue with 2 fumble recoveries a season ago. He has 173 tackles, 10 picks, and 12 pass breakups over his career in West Lafayette, and I think he will be key in Purdue's defensive hopes if they want to try and replicate anything close to what Walters had with Illinois last year.
Yeah, the defensive secondary is kind of the big all eyes on that with Coach Walters being a secondary guru. Obviously, getting Devin Witherspoon high in the first round from Illinois, but there a lot of transfers, a lot of big name transfers, like Braxton Myers from Ole Miss. But the one transfer I'm really looking at is Marquise Wilson, who transferred in from Penn State. He was a guy that the Penn State defensive staff was very high on, but I don't know the full details of why he chose to transfer. If your coaching staff's really high on you, I guess the opportunity to come play for Coach Walters, that's been a big driving force for a lot of these secondary guys. He's coming out of a defense at Penn State that really flew around, had really good athleticism in the secondary. And, this is a guy that already knows how to play in the Big Ten, and also on a high caliber winning team. So can he become kind of that leader, or bring that expertise and that knowledge with him over to Purdue? What kind of athleticism can we see from him in this Purdue? It's not the air raid, but they have a term for their defense as well. It's kind of along the air raid lingo, but it's going to be really interesting. So that's why not just even Marquise Wilson, I'm just looking at that entire secondary and how much it has changed. So, but yeah, Cam Allen is still going to be one of the main guys because he's a ball hawk, and that fits really well in the Ryan Walters defense. But yeah, this whole secondary, you could also look elsewhere in this defense. Nick Scorton, otherwise previously known as Nick Carraway, some people are hyping him up pretty high. There was one writer that actually had chosen him as the Big Ten preseason defensive player of the year as a prediction. So this is a kid that came in last year as a true freshman and really opened up some eyes coming off the edge. Obviously, now the defense is like a 3-4 hybrid type thing. So he's going to be kind of more standing up or down. He's going to be switching back and forth. But I expect a pretty big jump from year 1 to year 2 from Nick Scorton now. But yeah, that defense it's going to be, I think the defense is probably going to be what carries Purdue this year, which is a weird thing to say when you think back on Purdue and how great of offenses it has had in the past. But I think it's the defense that's really going to be the anchor for this team this year.
Yeah, and really honestly cause for some optimism as well, because if the defense plays as well as they kind of project to, and they can find something on offense, it could be another really solid year.
The defense did lose some pretty large names and large people up front. I mean, Branson Dean transferred to Miami. You lose Lawrence Johnson, who transferred to Auburn. Jack Sullivan, who transferred to USC. So you lost some bigger names, but at the same time, some bigger names, some bigger guys as well came in from the SEC. So it's going to be a totally different looking defense. I mean, that defensive front is still going to be anchored now by Cole Brevard, who's going to take up half of that line. The man is an absolute beast, but just size wise, he's a massive human being. Carmel grad, so that's cool. But yeah, there's going to be some different names out on that defensive line. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays, because that defensive line last year was pretty good for the Boilermakers.
So, looking at storylines for the 2023 season for Purdue, my storyline going into the season is basically like, as fans, what are the realistic expectations for Purdue in the first season under Ryan Walters? I mean, you're coming off of, even though you think like 8-6 is an all-time year. I mean, hey, who knows with how the Big Ten's being restructured and all that kind of stuff. With USC and UCLA coming in. Who knows, when the next time we'll see Purdue in the Big Ten championship. And the fact that they made it there, they were the Big Ten West champions, was pretty incredible. And you'd like to think the addition of Hudson Card puts them right back in the conversation in 2023. But no Ohio State or Michigan on the schedule last year. They get both this year.
Michigan ended up on the schedule.
Right. Well, this year they go to Ann Arbor in November. Which should be a fun time. Wisconsin should be better. Iowa's there. Minnesota is always in the conversation, or at least, spoiling the teams that are in the conversation. So, the question is, like, what can we expect from this team with a Big Ten West that was a little fluky, a little weird last year, should be a little bit more buttoned up this year, plus you get Ohio State and Michigan both in the regular season. I think 8 wins is entirely doable, and we'll get into our record prediction here pretty shortly. But it's the question is where could they end up this year that you would be like, all right, that's a great first season under Ryan Walters. That's kind of the storyline going into the year.
Yeah, for me, that is a good one. I mean, I think that is the storyline. There's not much other, but the kind of what the fans' expectations should be. Look, Purdue's got one of the toughest schedules in all of college football. I mean, yeah, you touched on the Big Ten schedule, but I mean, they also play host to Syracuse, a team that they lost to last year. Then they travel to Blacksburg and they play at Virginia Tech. So it's not a super easy schedule. Like, I think Purdue fans' expectations should always be bowl eligibility. That is where Purdue is right now. And then competitive against the teams like Ohio State and Michigan. And honestly, I think I'm not as sold on the rest of the Big Ten West this year with the amount of new coaches that have come in. I think Nebraska, yes, is going to be much improved because they're finally going to have a coach that can probably get the talent out of the players that's on that roster. Wisconsin, to me, has question marks because they are installing a totally different style of play that has not been their norm over the past, 30 years. Because you look at who the coaches have been, they've all come from that Barry Alvarez tree. And now you're bringing in Luke Fickell, who's just shaking things up and changing it all together. So, there is potential there for Purdue to kind of make that noise again, especially if the defense can click, especially if Hudson Card plays up to the expectations. But I think, like I said, the main topic of the season is just kind of seeing what Ryan Walters is as a head coach, because we now know he's a really good defensive coordinator. We know he's a really good recruiter, but can he take all of it, put it all together, on game day and run an entire team, because he does not have that head coaching experience. So I think it's just kind of to see how everything comes together throughout this season.
Looking at their schedule, they do start in September at home against Fresno State. Then they are, like you mentioned, at Virginia Tech. Then they get Syracuse at home. They get Wisconsin at home and Illinois at home. In October, they are at Iowa. They're at home against Ohio State, and then they go to Nebraska. And then in November, they're at Michigan, at home against Minnesota, at Northwestern, and then versus IU in the bucket game to finish off the season. So the over-under, according to DraftKings, is 5.5. I'm going with the over. They're at least going bowling this year. I think they're going to be 3-0 going into the Wisconsin game. I did a little bit of brief digging on Virginia Tech. I know that's a tough place to play, but I don't know that they're going to be a super tough team this year. I think Purdue can beat them on the road. It's going to be tough. That's no question about that. That's a tough environment to win in. I think they'll beat Fresno State. They should have beat Syracuse last year. Nothing.
They self-destructed last year.
Right? Yeah.
Syracuse.
That was a very frustrating and winnable game, and I think that they can bounce back and win that game against Syracuse at home this year. So I think they're going to be 3-0 going into the Wisconsin game. I do think they'll lose 3 out of 4 to the Badgers, Hawkeyes, and Buckeyes. They do beat Nebraska, in my opinion. They're going to lose at Michigan. And I'm going to have them losing to Minnesota too, just because that seems to always be a team that's a thorn in their side. I know they beat Minnesota last year on the road. But I do think they close out close out the year on wins against Northwestern. I know Northwestern's also sometimes a thorn in their side, but that program's a mess right now because of all that's going on there. And then IU, they beat them to end the year. So I've got 7 wins for Purdue this year. I think that's a solid number. I think 8 wins is in the conversation, but I think 7 is probably the more safe play.
Yeah, you looking at their schedule. Fresno State, a win. Syracuse, I think they win. Wisconsin, they lose. Illinois, they win. At Iowa, they lose. Ohio State, they lose. They win at Nebraska. They lose at Michigan. They win against Minnesota. They better win at Northwestern, which is funny. College Football News has their prediction as Purdue losing that game. This must have been put out before Pat Fitzgerald got fired.
I think if it's the Athlon article that I read, I think those come out in May. So I think that's
this one's College Football News. When did it come out? July 12th.
Okay, then I don't know. I got no excuses.
No excuses there. And honestly, 8-4 is a possibility. And honestly, a lot of it hinges on how that second game of the season at Virginia Tech plays out. That's a huge one. If you can come out of that one with a W, that is big. If you don't come out of that one with a W, I think I'm going to be leaning more towards 7-5 this year. However, I'm 6-6 is the floor. 8-4 is the ceiling.
Yeah, I think
7-5. I feel like is kind of where I'm comfortable.